stories every week. I believe I've scheduled them in for every Thursday, potentially. I might have got that wrong, but one of them is going to be the best scary stories of the year, so the highest rated ones. But tonight, we're just back on the No Sleep Reddit page. A favourite here, as always. And we're going to read some stories. It's as simple as that. So I hope you enjoy, hope you get relaxed, I hope you get scared. And let's get into story number 1. The first story we have is titled, "My neighbour has been beckoning my children from his window at night. I, 33 male, live in Texas with my daughter, Alicia, 8, female, and my son Jay, who's 4. Their mum has been out of the picture for the past 2 years. Not dead, just abusive. And I've managed pretty well as a single father. The 3 of us lived in a 2-bedroom in a nice neighbourhood. I've got a solid job and the kids are thankfully healthy. Everything was smooth sailing until one night 2 months ago, in which I was awoken by Jay poking me in the face. He was sobbing violently, though I recognised it as the I'm afraid kind of crying as opposed to the I'm hurt kind of crying, which made me a little less worried. Jay's always been nightmare prone, so I assumed that's what was causing him distress. When I asked him what was wrong, he said, "The man in the next house is making scary faces at me." I'd heard my fair share of Jay's stories about monsters terrorising him from the dark corners of his bedroom, but this was something new. I assumed he meant our neighbour's house, and the lack of fantastical elements in his description made me uneasy. It felt too specific to be one of his usual nightmares. I got out of bed and walked with Jay in tow to my kids' room. Alicia was awake in the top bunk. From the soft glow of their night light, I could see her crossing her arms and scowling down at her little brother. I didn't turn on any lights to give myself a better view of the outdoors and peered out of the bedroom window. Their window had curtains on it, but for once they hadn't been drawn all the way, and there was a small opening between them, through which Jay must have looked out. One side of the neighbour's house, was visible from Alicia and Jay's room. There were 2 windows on the neighbour's side of the house, but it was too dark inside to see anything. I recalled from what I'd seen in the daylight that the window on the left, the one closest to the front of the house, was the kitchen. I wasn't sure what the window on the right was, as it always had its curtains drawn. I asked Alicia if she'd seen anything, and she shook her head. "He's always having nightmares and crying. I don't want to share a room with him anymore. Dad, I never get any sleep. It's not fair." Of course, hearing that made Jay start crying again, so I let him sleep in my room for the night. He has this TMNT indoor camping tent that he prefers to his actual bed. Honestly, at that point I half suspected his nightmare to be a ploy to get me to let him camp anyway. I guess I'm a total pushover because he slept in that tent in my room for the next 2 nights. On the 3rd night, I was woken up, but this time by Alicia, who was standing over me and shaking my arm. That kid hadn't woken me up in the middle of the night for years. When I asked her what was wrong, she said, "The neighbour was making faces at me." Those words and the fear in my daughter's voice really put me on edge. I closed the curtains when I said goodnight. "Did you open them?" "Only a little, but it's 'cause I heard a weird noise." "What did you hear?" Alicia couldn't recall exactly. According to her, she had gotten out of bed to see what was going on, and when she lifted the curtain she saw a light on on in the neighbour's window. The curtains in the back room had been drawn back, and our neighbour was standing in his house, right up against the window frame. What was he doing? I asked. Alicia thought for a moment and then made an expression I never want to see on my child's face, or anyone else's for that matter ever again. I won't do it justice by describing it, but it looked something like this. First, she smiled with both sets of teeth, so that there was a little open slither between the rows, and then she furrowed her eyebrows. She inclined her head towards me, kind of Kubrick stare-esque, and straightened the muscles in her neck. The worst part, though, was what she did with her hands. She held out her left arm, forearm up. Then she clenched her right hand into a fist and moved it back and forth rapidly over her forearm. Poor thing described it as playing the violin, but it seemed pretty obvious to me that my neighbour was pantomiming cutting. Disturbed, I told Alicia to stop and to not make either the expression or the gesture again. I was angry and confused. My neighbour, a man in his 40s, was a bit of a recluse, but he had seemed normal enough in the 3 or 4 times I'd spoken to him. I could not fathom why he would do something like this to my kids. After asking Alicia a few more questions, I realised that my neighbour might not have done anything technically wrong. It wasn't against the law to make inappropriate gestures in your own home, but it seemed like he was targeting my kids specifically. Legal or not, I planned to have a little chat with him the following morning. My last question to Alicia was if our neighbour had made any other gestures, and she nodded. Then she started making beckoning, come here motions with both of her hands. I had Alicia sleep in my room for the night as well. I also checked out the window in my kids' room, but like before, I saw nothing. The house was completely dark. The next morning before work, and after dropping Alicia and Jay off to school, I spent a good 5 minutes knocking on my neighbour's front door. I figured he was home since the car was in the driveway, but he never answered the door. Eventually I had to leave for work, and as I was walking away, I turned around quickly to see if he was watching me. He was, the coward. I saw him for a split second at the front window before he ducked beneath the sill and out of view. Clearly the guy had problems. I yelled out to him to stop fucking with us and then left. That same night I put a plan in motion. While my kids slept in my room, I hung out in theirs. It was a Friday night and I was ready to pull an all-nighter so that I could catch my neighbour in the act. Although I trusted my kids, I wanted to confirm that there was actually something nefarious going on before I escalated things. I made sure the house was locked up and all the curtains drawn, tucked my kids in and sat on the floor under the window in their room. At around 9, I started marathoning midnight mass on my phone. I didn't want to wear headphones and miss any strange sounds, so I kept the volume low and mostly read subtitles. At midnight, I started to hear strange sounds. Like Alicia said, it's a bit hard to describe. Best I can do is that it was this low, repeated, clicking sound. You know, the chuk chuk sound you make to beckon a horse. It was something like that. All I knew is that the sound was undoubtedly coming from a person. After a few minutes of this, the sound switched to what I think was supposed to be a whistle, but it came out all wrong. Like someone sucking breath in through their teeth. The sound was so crisp that the neighbour's window must have been open, which was an unsettling thought given that there was only around 15 feet of space between our houses. Certain that the neighbour was at his window, and that this was my best chance to see him, I stood up and pulled the curtain back in one motion, I saw him right away. There was a dim light on in his room, allowing me to see that horrible expression Alicia had made the night prior. It was one thing to see my child's recreation, but it was far more frightening on an adult. His window was indeed open, and his arms were stuck out into the cold night, violently swiping against each other in a grotesque mimicry of self-harm. When he saw me, and realised that he was looking at another grown man and not some poor child, he stopped his erratic motions. His cartoonish grin faded, and another, more genuine emotion settled over his features. Rage. The man grabbed the window and slammed it shut, then closed the curtains with the same forcefulness. I let my own curtain fall. I was a little shell-shocked. I think, of course, I was perturbed by the sight of the man, by his face and by his movement, and the fact that he'd been doing that for who knows how many nights, in an attempt to frighten my kids. However, another detail stuck out as even more concerning to me, which was the fact I genuinely wasn't sure if the man I had just seen was my neighbour. I'd seen him so few times in the years I'd lived in that house, and I was having trouble conjuring up his face. I sat on the floor for a minute, my blood thundering in my ears. I definitely had enough evidence at that point to call the cops, right? Just as I was about to pull out my phone, I heard a tremendous smack against the glass of the bedroom window. After a brief hesitation, I pulled the curtains back again. There were no lights on in the neighbour's house, and there was also no one outside from what I could see. I pulled the curtains back a little further and saw a handprint in the top corner of the window pane. It's worth noting that our house is on a raised foundation, and that particular window is very tall. So even though the window is on the first floor, the man outside would have needed an insane vertical to get his hand up there. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. As I explained the situation to them, I quickly walked around the house to see if I could catch a glimpse of the man. My last stop was my bedroom. Once inside, I locked the doors, and while still on the phone with the operator, I took my handgun out of the safe in my closet. My heart was beating out of my damn chest, but I knew I had to stay calm. Even more so when I saw that Alicia was awake and looking out of the tent at me. I reassured her in as few words as I could, whispering that we were okay, but we had to stay very quiet. I sat on the edge of my bed, my firearm ready and my ears straining. My kids' tent was in the corner, and to the left of the tent, in the middle of the wall and directly across from where I sat, was a window. After what felt like an eternity, I saw something. It was a cloudless night, and the moonlight was bright enough that I could see a silhouette through the white curtains. The dark shape was nebulous at first, but became more clear as the man outside stepped closer to the window. Somehow he knew which room we were in. The silhouette didn't move for several minutes, and I remember being thankful that from the angle at which she sat, Alicia couldn't see it. Then something happened that I couldn't entirely wrap my head around. The man stepped back from the glass and raised his arms, making a Y shape with his body and his limbs. Only his arms were far too long. They seemed to be double the length that they should have been, each arm about the same length as his entire body. I thought at first that he was holding something, maybe two pipes that just appeared to be an extension of his limbs, but I could clearly see two hands at the end of could see 5 fingers on each hand flopping around slightly as the man brought his arms closer to the window. Thud, thud, thud. I stood up and readied myself to shoot, but just then the sounds of sirens pierced the quiet night. The man outside banged his hands against the window one last time, and then it was as if someone had sliced his arms at the elbows. His forearms seemed to shear right off, and the man took off running before they so much hit the ground. When the police officers announced themselves, I answered the door and explained the situation to them. 2 officers, a man and a woman, asked me a few questions about my neighbour, which I assume was necessary to establish probable cause for a search. Once finished, they told me to stay inside with the doors locked while they investigated the neighbour's house. I watched them through the window of Alicia and Jay's room. They knocked on the neighbour's door, and when no one answered, they tried the front door handle. I watched the unlocked door swing open. The 2 looked at one another and then entered. I'm not sure what they found inside that house. All I know is that when they emerged a few moments later, they both looked very disturbed. When I went outside to ask what they had found, the female officer told me simply, "Your neighbour is dead." The rest of the night was a blur of strangers in uniforms filing in and out of my neighbour's home. Some came to my porch afterwards to ask me questions, and none offered me any answers. They moved with tight-lipped efficiency, their faces guarded, their words clipped. At one point I wandered to the side of the house and found several people photographing something on the ground outside my bedroom window. Before they could ask me to leave, I made out the gruesome shape of 2 human arms. The kids and I have been staying in my parents' apartments for months, and I think everyone, even Jay, is getting tired of the cramped living situation. We can't stay in the house. Alicia is way too traumatised for that, and I wouldn't be comfortable staying there, while the murderer is still at large anyway. I want to sell the damn house, but our story going semi-viral is making that difficult. After all, who would want a house that, thanks to the news, has become permanently associated with phrases like dismemberment and days of torture, and victim barely recognisable as human? That was scary. That was terrifying. When it was saying about the arms extending, I was like, oh gosh, here we go. It's just like a goofy. It started off scary. It's now gonna become like a goofy, like paranormal thing. But he chopped the guy's arms off and then used them to knock on their house. Yeah, that's pretty grim. That is pretty grim. This next story is titled, "This is your Uber Eats driver. Answer please. I'm scared." If you're reading this, I need you to find a way to contact my local authorities for me before sunrise. You're probably thinking, what the hell? And very much justified. Let me start by saying my name is not important, but for story purposes I'll go by Richie, and I was supposed to be enjoying some dank birria tacos right now with my girlfriends. But now here I am holding a Gutco knife as I write from the closet in her parents' bedroom. This is poorly written. Laura's Paris mansion sits alone and secluded on the outskirts of the Dallas Metroplex, nestled in one of those rich suburban landscapes where silence is as thick as the evening fog. We were supposed to be enjoying our last few days before heading back to college. Smoking, drinking, lots of activities that aren't important. If only I had listened. No, like, really listened. "Richie, are you even hearing me?" Laura's voice cut through my distraction. driver ETA is 20 minutes. Bet, I replied half-heartedly. Thanks again. It was past 2 a.m. and Laura was drunk, White Claw in hand, mid-sentence about our communication issues from this past semester, and we never truly listened to each other. The irony here would be hilarious in any other situation other than this one tonight. You don't know my rising sign or even my favourite vegetable, and it's not like I'm telling you these things all the time, she said. I will give her that. Babe is brash and as she is chatty. Then she looked me dead in the eyes and asked, what's even the code to get into the front door? I confidently told her I knew it, but here's the truth. I didn't. Was it 00203 or was it 00308? I wasn't sure, but I wasn't about to admit that. I'm a great listener, I told her, forcing a smile. My phone buzzed again, a text from the Uber driver. Hello, this is Diego with Uber. Can I call you? I only saw half the message. Laura was still talking, and I was still not listening. We started to argue, the usual dance of a relationship stretched thin by distance and miscommunication. She even tossed out again if I knew her simple code to access her house, and again I deflected. Babe, you let me in every day since we started dating, why would I need to know that? Then another text came. This one finally caught my attention. Answer please, I'm scared. Something felt off. I told her she was right as I stepped into the kitchen to call Diego. His voice was timid, shaking. Hi, this is Diego. I'm your driver. I have your tacos. Oh, thanks, bro. This is all I can try to muster since I hate small talk. You good? I hit a deer, he said. What? But when I got out to check, there was nothing there. He paused, then added something that made my skin crawl. Then I saw her, a woman, standing by the road. She had this long dress facing an open field. Her back was turned to me. I tried to calm him down, chalking it up to the creepy dusk driving in Dallas backwards. Hey, you know how Dallas County treats their homeless man? Probably just a lady wandering out past the city. I'll give you a good tip, bud, I said. Just get my Jack in the Box to me. But Diego wasn't letting me go. Sir, I've seen her twice now, he whispered. I'm sorry. She was standing at a stop sign at 10 miles, and then I saw her again just now before calling you. She was on a billboard railing, just standing there, always with her back turned. I could hear Laura in the background asking what was taking so long. Diego was praying now, muttering in Spanish. His fear was infectious, crawling through the phone line and into my bones. Look, I'm almost there, he said. Can you meet me outside? Walking over to my book bag, I grabbed my gun, just in case. What the hell are you doing? She caught me as I started to tuck my Smith into my back pocket. I put Diego on mute and called her up to speed, which immediately caused her to laugh. Vagrants are everywhere. He needs to chill out. And you, she added, grabbing for my gun. Give me that now, you know how my parents feel about that. I didn't argue with her and handed it over. It's her house anyway, yet something didn't feel right. Sir? Fuck, I forgot Diego. Diego, I said quickly, unmuting and putting him on speakerphone for us both to hear. Hey, sorry, I was grabbing my shoes. Are you here? Silence. Diego. Silence, still. With him still I checked his GPS. He was here, right outside. Then he finally said something you never want to hear at 2 a.m. The woman, Diego forced out in almost a whisper. "She's here, my friend." "Diego, where is she?" "She's on the roof. Back turned, amigo." "How?" Laura rolled her eyes, cocking my gun. She grabbed her jacket and headed out, telling me to stay inside and to be ready to call 911 just in case. "I'll get the food and check on the driver," she said. "If someone's on the roof, call the cops." "Babe, I'll just go grab it." "No, I got him." She stopped in a drunk stare. "Besides, at least I know my code." And with a smirk that said checkmate, my girlfriend headed outside. Through the door camera, I watched her approach the car. Back on with Diego, I thanked and told him Laura was on her way. Her nonchalance made me realise how silly this seemed. A woman on the roof. And did he really hit a deer, or just trying to get a fat tip with a bizarre story? That's when I got more silence from Diego. "Hey Diego, are you there? My girlfriend is walking up." "Hello?" I could hear Laura approaching on his phone. "Is anyone?" Her voice cut off. What the fuck? Did he attack my girlfriend? Was there really a woman outside? I ran for the door when I heard a laugh. Not Laura's laugh. Someone else laughing. Or trying to laugh and sound human. I stopped in my tracks. Something in me told me not to open the door. Diego. Silence on the other end. Diego. More laughter. It sounded like neither male or female. Laura. My phone lost signal. The Wi-Fi flickered. Then the lights went out. The only light left in Laura's mansion was the camera security panel at the front door. I ran to it, assuming it must have its own connection separate from the house. I tried the panic button in big red digital letters, but the panel was unresponsive. Yet the camera was just fine. What was happening? And there she was, on the camera. Laura. Back turned to me. In the driveway, Diego's car sat with hazards blinking. I could barely see, but his car doors were all swung open, completely empty. "Laura," I called through the door mic. "Stop playing around." She didn't respond. "Babe." Silence. She didn't move a muscle. "Babe." Communication, remember that. Not a word as the bright hazard lights flashed on and off, on and off. Laura didn't move for what felt like an hour, and then, like a puppet on a strange marionette, she lifted her hand out. The way she twisted her arm and made me force myself to assume it was just a camera glitch. I heard a weird crackle as she then stuck out one crooked finger and started pressing door codes. 00000 buzz. Rejected. 00001 buzz. Rejected. Babe. 00003 buzz. Rejected. Babe, do you need me to let you in? 00004 buzz. Rejected. She continued one code after the other. So here I am in her parents' closet with her mum's steak knives. My gun was last with her. My phone will suddenly not connect. The system is operational to send help, and yet the only thing keeping her from getting in. And I still hear her downstairs, pressing buttons, buzz, reject. You don't listen to me rings through my ears from every time she ever told me that since we started dating, and now I'm sitting here accepting she was right. I could have just admitted I don't listen and how I could do better, and hell, even ask her what the house code was. But now looking at me, 00203 I'm reeling as I try to remember. Laura knows the code to her own home. Whatever that is outside does not, and it's only a matter of time before it gets it right. Our third story is a fairly short one, titled I Found My Little Sister's Diary. I wish I hadn't. My little sister Emily always loved keeping a diary. She had stacks of them, pastel covers with little locks, each one filled with messy handwriting and stickers. She used to guard them fiercely, threatening to tell me if I so much as looked at them. But Emily passed away 3 months ago. She was only 11, a freak accident at the lake. She fell in, hit her head on a rock and drowned before anyone could get to her. The funeral was unbearable, and afterward I couldn't bring myself to touch her things. Her room remained untouched, like a shrine to the girl that she used to be. But last week Mum asked me to start sorting through her belongings. I found her latest diary in the bottom drawer of her desk. It was unlocked. I thought reading it might bring me some closure. I thought it would help me feel close to her again. I was wrong. The first few entries were normal. Today we had pizza for dinner. I took 2 slices before Joey could get them all. He got mad, but I don't care. That made me smile. Emily always loved teasing me. The next few pages were full of harmless ramblings, complaints about school, doodles of flowers and stars, lists of her favourite songs. But then, about halfway through, the tone started to change. I saw the man again today. He was standing in the backyard watching me through the window. I told Mum, but she said I was imagining things. He's always there though. I can feel him. I paused, flipping back through the earlier entries, no mention of him before. Maybe it was just Emily's overactive imagination. She'd always been a little jumpy, a little too eager to bathe in monsters under the bed. I kept reading. The man came closer last night. He tapped on my window. He didn't say anything, just smiled at me. His teeth are so big. I wanted to scream, but I was too scared. I felt a chill run down my spine. Emily's handwriting got messier with each entry, her words more frantic. He comes inside now. He stands at the foot of my bed while I pretend to be asleep. He whispers my name. He says he's waiting. I flipped to the last few pages, my heart pounding. Joey doesn't see him. No one does. He told me not to tell. He said they wouldn't believe me. He said I belong to him now. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking. This had to be some kind of prank. A made-up story Emily wrote to scare me. But the way she described it, the fear in her words, it felt real. Too real. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the diary. I couldn't shake the image of Emily lying in bed, too terrified to scream while some stranger stood over her. I barely slept. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed about her. She was standing at the edge of the lake, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. When I woke up, I was drenched in sweat, and there was mud on my shoes. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd gone outside to clear my head and didn't remember. But the next day, I found a page from Emily's diary lying on my desk. I hadn't brought the diary upstairs. The page wasn't one I read before. He says Joey will come next. He says Joey will join me soon. My blood turned to ice. That night I locked my bedroom door. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. The grief was playing tricks on me. But as I lay there staring at the ceiling, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. On my window. I didn't want to look. I couldn't. But something made me turn my head. He was there. A man, tall and thin, his face pale and stretched like wax. He smiled at me, baring rows of jagged teeth, and pressed a single finger to his lips. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. When I woke up, it was morning. The window was locked, no sign of anyone outside. I almost convinced myself it was a dream, until I went downstairs and found another page from Emily's diary on the kitchen table. He says it's time. He says Joey belongs to him now. I haven't slept since. I haven't left the house. I keep hearing taps at the windows, whispers in the dark. Last night I found muddy footprints leading from the lake to my bedroom door. I think I understand now. Emily didn't fall. She didn't hit her head. He took her. And now he's coming for me. Right, this story is titled Growing Up, We Weren't Allowed to Look at Grandma During Her Golden Hour. I wish I never found out why. This is quite a long one, so maybe the last one of the video and we'll see how we get on. At the front door, Mum hesitated, drew a deep breath and said, "Okay, has everybody still got their blindfolds?" "No," my brother Logan replied sarcastically. "I lost mine since you asked me 3 seconds ago." Logan hated the safety lectures we got whenever we visited Grandma. He was 13 and I was 10, both tall and stocky with a shock of blonde hair. Mum's eyes narrowed at him. "Logan, how about you drop the attitude? Like I haven't got enough on my plate already." "My blindfold's right there," I said, tapping my forehead before another argument broke out. "Good boy, Blake. We'll be in and out in 20 minutes, I promise." "Then we're getting a Burger King, right?" "Absolutely," she said with a bright smile. I punched the air while Logan muttered something too low to hear. A special treat like Burger King was a huge deal to me back then. Our grandparents' house, lay in the centre of a dirt lot surrounded by a chain-link fence. All the curtains were taped shut. Mum rapped at the door. Then we waited there for a few minutes while rain hammered the gutters like a steel drum. I remember worrying we'd stand there until Grandma's golden hour started. Mum grabbed a ring of keys from her bag and undid the series of locks. Then we stepped into the musty air of the house, shaking water from our coats and jackets. All the tacky, upholstered furniture was already outdated, even back then, and the walls were covered with shelves displaying Grandpa's prized model car collection. Usually Logan and I stood on the welcome mat while Mum battened down the hatches, but past the stairs and to the left, Smoke was pouring out from beneath the kitchen door. Mum rushed along the corridor into the kitchen, followed closely by Blake and I. The downstairs landing wrapped around the stairs with the kitchen at the back of the house. On the stove, a frying pan was spurting giant flames as Grandma, completely unaware of the danger, tried to scramble some eggs. Mum yanked the pan off the grill just as an alarm started shrieking. She shouted for us to get Grandma out of there, waving away most of the smoke with a set of oven mitts. Dressed in her pink nightgown, Grandma fought us every step of the way, swiping at the air with her long yellow nails. I was afraid of using too much force because her frail body always made me picture a skeleton. In the lounge, she refused to settle on a plastic-covered sofa. Everything was shrink-wrapped, really, until Logan promised he'd make her a corned beef sandwich if she behaved, speaking in the soft tones you'd use around a fussy toddler. Shortly after the alarm quieted, Mum came in and said to Grandma, "Where's Dad? He didn't answer the door." "Ugh, don't speak to me about that man. I was washing the dog, but he kept climbing away." "Grandma and Grandpa got a dog," I whispered to Logan. "No, dickhead. Grandma's nuts, remember?" "Logan," Mum snapped. She insisted we refer to Grandma's problems as her funny spells. Once it became obvious nobody could coax any sense out of the old lady, Mum went to find Grandpa herself. We'd barely had time to sit when she screamed from a room upstairs. Logan and I exchanged a look of concern, then rushed after her. Grandpa was sprawled across the bathroom floor, groaning. A shower curtain, which had been ripped off its hooks, covered his midsection, and blood oozed from a deep gash along his forehead, staining the tiled floor red. He'd slipped while climbing out of the tub. Him and Mum had endless arguments about that house being a death trap, but he refused to move. He was afraid what might have happened if they moved someplace filled with nosy neighbours. Mum shouted at me to call for an ambulance. I rushed downstairs, but the rotary phone in the landing spat a dead tone. I figured the storm had knocked out the lines. "It's not working," I said as I rushed back. Mum pinched the bridge of her nose and sobbed while Logan and I stood there. Kids aren't great at processing those sort of situations. She told Logan to help her get Grandpa into a bathrobe hanging from a nearby rack. "Ew, gross," Logan sneered. Now, Mum's sudden outburst upset me more than all the blood. She rarely raised her voice. She told me to help with the doors. Grandpa must have noticed me shaking because he forced a smile and said, "I tell you, Blake, this getting old business ain't for the faint-hearted." He spoke as if he just had 5 glasses of whiskey, all sluggish and lazy. Logan and Mum helped him outside into the family Volvo, all 4 of us getting drenched. "All right, everybody in the car," she said, panting heavily. "I'm not leaving Eleanor," Grandpa protested from the passenger seat. "She needs somebody to keep an eye on her." Mum's hand shot up out of frustration. She took a moment to compose herself, checked her watch, and then said, "Okay, you boys stay here while I take Grandpa to the hospital. Grandma's gonna be fine for another 3 hours. I'll be back before then, but keep your blindfolds closed just in case. Logan, you're in charge. Set your electric watch thingy for 8:45 so you don't forget." "That's okay, I'll remember, just do it," she screamed as she climbed into the car, slamming the door shut behind her. As we watched her drive off, I told myself there was no reason to freak out. We'd stayed with Grandma during her golden hour many times. Yeah, before her funny spells, a voice at the back of my mind added, we still getting Burger King?" I asked Logan after Mum's Volvo disappeared. He rolled his eyes and spun toward the house. That stung. I was sick of him treating me like a stupid kid. The locks were more complicated than a Rubik's Cube, so Logan needed to reseal them. As he did, Grandma hobbled out of the lounge. I met her at the doorway, but she said, "Get your hands off me, pervert." "Grandma, it's me, Blake." "I'm not an invalid. Piss off before I scream." It hurt when she treated me like a stranger. Growing up, I'd always looked forward to seeing her. The way she'd hug me close and cover the top of my head with fierce little kisses, and insist on giving me money for sweets. Logan and I both had a go at explaining what happened, but she only dudded and said, "That man always was a drama queen." She went to climb the stairs, but between her stooped spine and rickety knees, the trek took 5 minutes. Even with our help, any time we steadied her, she unloaded another round of insults. She disappeared into the bedroom, and then her rough chainsaw snore rang out. And that was that. My brother and I were stranded there without so much as a Game Boy. In the lounge, a CRT TV received a fuzzy picture of BBC One, so we watched 20 minutes of a cooking show where celebrities crowded around a sizzling pan. With every roll of thunder, the signal temporarily turned to black and white fuzz. I kept pestering Logan to play the blind game, but he insisted he was too old until a program about renovating houses started. The blind game was simple. Somebody put their blindfold on and looked for the other while the hider tried sneaking up on them. Usually I hid in a storage cupboard at the back of the kitchen just large enough to hold me, a vacuum cleaner and a mop. But now I was old enough and smart enough to realise it was the first place Logan checked. So I left the door slightly open and perched myself on the closest counter instead. When he made a beeline for the nook, I leapt onto his back. He shrugged me off, wrestled me onto the floor, and then pinched the pressure point in my shoulder, both of us laughing. After a few rounds, we'd exhausted every hiding place and returned to the TV. Our stomachs wouldn't quit grumbling. A bacon double cheeseburger should have been halfway through my digestive system by then. God, he really wants his Burger King, doesn't he? As time marched on, we spoke less and less. Even though the windows were blocked, I knew it was getting dark. 7:30 became 7:45, then 8. My teeth started chattering together. "Quit being such a pussy," Logan said, although I could tell he was nervous because he kept tapping his watch non-stop. I must have still looked scared because he reached over and patted me on the shoulder. "Just chill, Mum will get back soon, then we'll go for Burger King." As if on cue, his watch beeped. 15 minutes to go. Swallowing a gulp, he said, "Okay, get your blindfold on." He helped adjust mine so everything was perfectly black. Then we sat in silence while a tennis ball got batted around on TV. I'm not sure how much time passed because I didn't want to risk peeking at the clock above the mantelpiece. Soon the TV cut to an emergency weather report. A lady announced several major roads were closed due to flooding. My hands balled into fists. Did that mean Mum couldn't reach us? From above our heads, there came a heavy thud. My neck craned towards the sound. On television, a crowd applauded. Logan fumbled for the remote to switch it off, then we breathed in sharply. "What should we do?" I whispered. "Nothing," I did too, partly because I was sick of him brushing me aside, mostly because I was terrified of being left alone. I grabbed onto his t-shirt despite the protests, and then we shuffled into the chilly, drafty hall, hands fumbling across radiators, feet stamping along the floor. On our way to the stairs, Logan tried the phone, but it was dead. The noisy steps creaked beneath our feet. Still blindfolded, we reached the upper landing, and then Logan gently pushed open the bedroom door only a slither, but wide enough that hot air blasted me in the face, warm and moist like the inside of a greenhouse. "Grandma," he whispered. A chilling scream rang out, which caused us to cling on to each other. Then Logan's hands fumbled over my face, checking the blindfold hadn't slipped. "Sorry, boys," Grandma said, laughing. "I didn't realize you were here. Where's your mother?" Her voice radiated warmth now, even though she spoke through a swollen throat close to the ceiling. It had a tender quality that helps settle your nerves, even if you'd cut your finger or seen a monster in the closet. An enormous sense of relief washed through me. Her funny spell had ended. She'd become lucid again. After we explained what happened, she said, "Well, nothing else doing but to wait the storm out, I'm afraid. Have you boys had tea yet?" We told her we hadn't. "Alright then, let's get you fed and watered," she said as she ducked beneath the doorframe. Logan and I felt our way into the kitchen and sat around the table, while cupboards swung open and shut. Soon the aroma of beef stew filled the air. "Bon appetit," Grandma said, setting out 2 bowls. "Do you know what that means, Blake?" "Good appetite." "Smart lad. What do you boys say to some pavlova for dessert?" "Yes, please," I said. Hell yeah," Logan added. She scolded him for his language, then said, "I'll leave you to eat in peace. Call me when you're ready. Remember, blindfolds stay on." I devoured my stew without spilling much. Was I still upset about Burger King? Sure. But a stew pavlova 2-punch combo tasted almost as good. Soon our spoons dropped into the bowls, then we sat back, our bellies full. We shouted we were done. Then we waited, and we waited, and we waited. The legs of Logan's chair scraped across the floor. "Logan," I said anxiously. "Chill. I'm gonna tell her we're ready for dessert." He marched off down the hall, leaving me alone. It was dead quiet in the house except for the rain, thunder, and my racing thoughts. It had easily been 5 hours since Mum left. How bad was the storm anyway? Could we have been trapped there for days? And what about Grandpa? Would he be okay? Part of me wanted to stay there and let Logan sort things out, but I wasn't a kid anymore. I went after him, calling as I went. My hands ran over the side panelling along the walls, over Grandpa's model cars. I fumbled for door handles, calling into empty room after empty room. The house felt twice as big without Logan to guide the way. Passing the stairs, the temperature shot up. On the far side, as I nudged the door into the den open, thick, stuffy air seeped out, poisoning the hall. "Logan," I called. Nobody answered, but as I turned away, a floorboard creaked on the far side of the room. Then a voice spoke out of the darkness, all shredded and hoarse, like scud water regurgitating through a storm drain. "My bed's different." I said, "Grandma, is that you?" "What are you growing corn in those ears?" "Of course it's me." I said, "The bed's different." There was no bed in there, only a cabinet, a rickety chair, and a sewing machine. Sweat ran down beneath the blindfold and stung my eyes. Despite the heat, I was shivering. "Grandma, is everything okay?" "Of course it's okay," she snapped. Do you remember who I am?" I asked, and I immediately wish I hadn't, as if her not answering the question kept things from being real. "What, am I, an imbecile? You're Blake." My chest unclenched. "Funny spell averted," I sighed and said, "Have you seen Logan? He was looking for you." "Who knows what that boy's up to? Stealing, probably." This confused me. She scolded Logan for his language a lot, sure, but he was no thief. Anyway, I came to say we're ready for Pavlova." Fine, but first take that silly thing off your head and come give me a hug." With every passing second, the icy silence which followed became more and more unbearable. I cleared my throat. "But Grandma, it's your golden hour. We're not supposed to." "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped as the cruel edge seeped back into her voice. "Take that thing off and let me see your beautiful face." The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. She'd lapsed into another one of her episodes. Desperate, I said, "Grandma, I don't think that's a good idea. You're sick." "Of course I'm sick," she snarled. "And you know what the best medicine is? A hug from my favourite grandson." From behind, somebody burst along and fumbled around until they grabbed me by the arm. "Run," Blake shouted. He'd sensed the danger and gone the other way around the stairs to find me. He dragged me down the hall. Wait, isn't he Blake? Shouldn't it be Logan who shouted? He dragged me down the hall by the arm so fast we crashed against lamps and banged our shins against side tables, knocking model cars to the ground and breaking them into 1,000 pieces. At the front door we fumbled with the locks, but they were borderline impossible even when we could see. We were like rats trapped in a maze. "Boys, where are you going?" Grandma screamed in a terrified voice. "Don't leave me." Heavy footsteps came stomping along. Her arms must have been held out wide because they scraped along both sides of the wall, a distance of more than 6 feet. Logan grabbed me again and we raced into the kitchen. He slammed the door shut and held his weight against it. "Grab a chair," threw out the ground floor doors open and shut. "Where did you boys go? Come back." I helped get a chair wedged beneath the handle just as it jiggled. "Boys, what's wrong? Let me in." The door bounced once, twice. "Quick," Logan shouted. We held our backs against the door just as Grandma struck a third time, threatening to knock us away. She alternated between mashing her fists and crying for help. I squeezed my eyes shut beneath the blindfold and prayed for Mum to come save us. Then, everything stopped. As we listened, the side of the door shivered open just a crack. I sensed a finger worming through the gap, followed by a hand, then an entire arm. The arm probed the space directly above our heads. I crouched low, but bony fingers crawled along the top of my skull, hotter than the stove. The hand clamped shut around my head, ripping away the blindfold and singeing the hair as I dropped to the floor. Grandma hissed raw fury, then the door bounced again. Without our combined weight holding it shut, the chair gave way. The door burst open and slammed against the inside wall, knocking Logan onto the floor beside me. I caught a glimpse of a mishappened silhouette filling the outer hall, but at the last second shielded my eyes from the glow. Logan picked me up. "My blindfold," I whimpered. In a flash, he wrestled his own over my eyes. "Hug time," the creature on the far side of the room snarled, the heat surging around us. Logan shielded my body with his own, ready to make his last stand, but I shouted, "The compartment!" We sprinted toward the tiny nook. Me first, then Logan tried squeezing in after. I tossed the vacuum and mop away and then made myself as small as possible. He wedged himself inside and pulled the door as far as it could go. Neither of us had space to breathe, but for a moment I thought we'd be safe in here. But then, two long arms invaded the space. "Come to Granny." Logan started sliding away. I found his hands and held on with all my strength, but Grandma was too strong. My big brother, my protector, got reeled away like a fish on a line. He screamed, but not for long, because that scream became a dry croak as his throat closed over. I wanted to help, but I couldn't bring myself to move. So I yanked the door shut and held my breath. Soon I couldn't hear anything except the harsh thud of blood in my ears. It wasn't long before Logan's watch beeped again, signaling the end of Grandma's golden hour. I didn't budge a single inch, not even when Mum's car pulled up outside, or when she entered the house, or when she found out what had happened and started screaming. A few days later I was helping Grandpa out of the car. His head was encased in a thick bandage. I helped him over to the house while Mum unlocked the door. In the den, Grandma was raving about invisible chickens. Logan was there too, sitting on an armchair. I asked if he wanted to play the blind man's game, but his eyes stayed locked on the new Game Boy Mum bought for him. Mum got Grandpa settled, then made lasagna which everyone ate except Grandma, who complained it tasted worse than fried dog shit. Afterwards, Logan asked if we were going to stick around, but Mum said she needed to get me home because I had homework to finish. That wasn't true, and I think he knew this. The real reason was because it was already 8:45, which meant Logan and Grandma's golden hour was about